Mike pulled out an old prison photo showing him reading a book in his cell. "This picture changed everything," he said quietly. "Before prison, I'd never read a book in my life. I was functionally illiterate despite being worth hundreds of millions." His eyes reflected years of hard-earned growth. But in that cell, books became my escape, my education, my salvation. I read Voltaire, Machiavelli, Malcolm X. I went from throwing punches to understanding philosophy. Prison gave me the education money couldn't buy. Tonight, I'm sitting across from Mike Tyson, the man who went from being the youngest heavyweight champion in history to a convicted felon, then transformed himself from what he calls a monster into one of the most surprisingly philosophical voices in modern entertainment. Worth over $10 million again through his cannabis empire and media ventures, Mike's greatest achievement isn't his boxing records. It's his complete psychological and spiritual transformation during 3 years in prison. "People think they know my story," Mike continued, his voice carrying none of the menace that once terrified opponents. "Kid from the streets becomes youngest heavyweight champion, makes $300 million, loses it all, goes to prison. But they don't understand what really happened in that cell. That's where Mike Tyson died, and someone completely different was born." The waiter brought our drinks, but Mike's focus remained on the pivotal period that redefined his entire existence. "When I entered Indiana Youth Center in 1992, I was 25 years old and completely out of control. I'd been living like an animal for years, fighting, drinking, doing drugs, hurting people. I thought power meant making everyone afraid of me. The conviction was for rape, which I still maintain I didn't commit. But regardless of guilt or innocence on that specific charge, I was guilty of so much else. I was guilty of being a terrible human being, of using my strength to intimidate and harm others." Mike showed me letters he'd written from prison, revealing the gradual evolution of his thinking and writing ability. The first few months were hell. I was angry, bitter, planning revenge against everyone I felt had wronged me. I was going to come out and destroy Don King, destroy the prosecutors, destroy anyone who'd crossed me. But that anger was eating me alive from the inside. What changed your mindset? A Muslim inmate named Qadir gave me a copy of the Quran and told me, "Brother, you're not angry at them. You're angry at yourself." He was right. All that rage was really self-hatred. I hated what I'd become, but I didn't know how to change. That's when I started reading. First the Quran, then the Bible, then philosophy books. I discovered that every great thinker in history had struggled with the same questions I was facing. Who am I? What's my purpose? How do I become the person I'm supposed to be? The first course arrived, but Mike's passion for describing his intellectual awakening kept him engaged. The reading was hard at first because my education was so poor. I could barely read at a high school level despite being a multimillionaire. But I had nothing but time, so I read slowly, looked up words I didn't understand, and gradually my mind started opening up. Machiavelli's The Prince taught me about real power versus the illusion of power. Voltaire showed me how to think critically about everything I'd been told. Malcolm X's autobiography revealed how someone could completely transform themselves through self-education and spiritual discipline. Mike pulled up a list of books he'd read in prison, showing the breadth of his intellectual journey. I read everything: history, philosophy, religion, biographies of great leaders. Each book was like a conversation with someone who'd faced similar struggles and found ways to overcome them. I realized that my problems weren't unique. Great men throughout history had conquered their demons and found peace. How did this reading change your daily routine in prison? I developed discipline I'd never had before. Wake up at 5 a.m., pray, exercise, read for hours, write in my journal, study Arabic, meditate before sleep. I treated prison like a monastery where I was rebuilding myself from the foundation up. The meditation was crucial. For the first time in my life, I learned to sit quietly with my thoughts without needing to hit something or hurt someone. I started understanding the difference between feeling angry and acting on anger. The main course was served, and Mike reflected on the spiritual aspects of his transformation. Converting to Islam gave me structure and purpose. The daily prayers forced me to stop and reflect 5 times a day. The study of Arabic engaged my mind in ways I'd never experienced. The community of Muslim inmates showed me what brotherhood actually meant. But it wasn't just about religion, it was about discipline and self-respect. Islam taught me that my body is a temple, not a weapon, that my mind is a gift, not a curse, that my strength should protect others, not intimidate them. Tell me about your relationships with other inmates. That's where I learned the most about human nature. In prison, you can't hide behind money or fame. People judge you based on your character and how you treat others. I had to earn respect through my actions, not my reputation. I met guys who'd committed terrible crimes, but were working hard to become better people. I met others who were innocent, but refused to let bitterness destroy them. I learned that everyone has the capacity for both good and evil, and our choices determine which side wins. Mike showed me photos and letters from fellow inmates, demonstrating the genuine friendships he'd formed. These relationships taught me empathy, which I'd never felt before. When you see someone struggling with addiction, abuse, or mental illness, you start understanding that hurt people hurt people. I realized that my own violence came from my own pain. How did you handle the public perception during this time? The media painted me as a fallen hero or a dangerous animal. My image was completely destroyed. My earning potential was gone. My legacy was ruined. But in a strange way, that liberation was freeing. When you have nothing left to lose, you can focus entirely on becoming who you want to be, rather than maintaining who people expect you to be. Prison stripped away all the external validation and forced me to find internal worth. The restaurant was quieter now, allowing us to explore the deeper psychological aspects of his transformation. The real breakthrough came when I stopped seeing myself as a victim. Yes, I'd had a terrible childhood, abusive father, poverty, violence, but millions of people have bad childhoods without becoming monsters. I had to take responsibility for my choices. I wrote letters to people I'd hurt, apologizing for my behavior. Not because I expected forgiveness, but because I needed to acknowledge the damage I'd caused. That process of accountability was painful, but necessary. What about your relationship with boxing during this period? I had to completely reimagine what boxing meant to me. Before prison, fighting was about dominance, intimidation, destroying opponents. After prison, I understood that boxing could be an art form, a sport, a way to test myself without hating my opponent. I realized that my best fights weren't the ones where I was most angry. They were the ones where I was most disciplined and focused. The violence was just the surface. Underneath was strategy, technique, mental control. Mike pulled up training footage from before and after prison, showing the visible difference in his approach. When I came out of prison, I was technically a better fighter because I'd learned patience and self-control. But I was also more vulnerable because I'd lost that murderous instinct that had intimidated opponents. How did you maintain your transformation after release? That was the real test. Prison provides structure, but the outside world offers unlimited temptation. I had to consciously choose to maintain the disciplines I'd learned: daily prayer, regular reading, meditation, healthy relationships. I also surrounded myself with different people. Instead of yes men and enablers, I sought out mentors, spiritual advisors, and friends who would hold me accountable for my behavior. The setbacks were inevitable. I made mistakes, lost control sometimes, fell back into old patterns. But the difference was that I now had tools to recognize when I was going off track and correct course. As our dinner wound down, Mike reflected on the broader implications of his prison transformation. Prison saved my life, but more importantly, it saved my soul. If I had continued on the path I was on, I would have either killed someone or gotten myself killed. The 3 years of forced introspection prevented decades of destruction. I went in as someone who used physical power to solve every problem. I came out understanding that real strength is emotional intelligence, self-discipline, and the ability to help others become better versions of themselves. What's your advice for people facing their own personal prisons? Embrace the struggle because that's where growth happens. Whether your prison is literal or metaphorical, addiction, depression, anger, fear. Use that isolation to examine yourself honestly and make conscious changes. Read everything you can get your hands on. Other people's wisdom can guide you through your darkest moments. Don't be too proud to learn from anyone, regardless of their background or circumstances. Most importantly, understand that transformation is possible at any age, from any starting point. I was 25 and completely lost when I went to prison. I'm 57 now and still learning, still growing, still becoming a better person. What does your life look like now? Peaceful. I have a beautiful family, successful businesses, and most importantly, I sleep well at night because I'm not carrying hatred or anger. My cannabis company, Tyson 2.0, helps people find peace and healing, which gives my work meaning beyond just making money. The podcast allows me to have deep conversations with interesting people, which feeds my curiosity and continues my education. Every guest teaches me something new about life, success, or human nature. As we stood to leave, Mike offered his final insight about transformation, redemption, and the power of education. The biggest lesson from my prison experience is that your past doesn't determine your future, your choices do. I spent the first 25 years of my life becoming a monster and the last 32 years becoming a human being. Education is the great equalizer. It doesn't matter if you're in a palace or a prison cell. Books can transport you anywhere, teach you anything, and transform you completely. I went from functionally illiterate to philosophical, and that journey happened one page at a time. Prison taught me that the strongest opponent you'll ever face is yourself, and the greatest victory you can achieve is self-mastery. Everything else, championships, money, fame, is temporary. But the person you become through overcoming your demons, that's permanent. This evening with Mike Tyson revealed that the most profound transformations often happen in the darkest places, and that sometimes losing everything is the prerequisite for finding yourself, proving that it's never too late to completely reimagine who you are and what you're capable of becoming. Don't forget to subscribe and check out the other videos to hear the most private dinner conversations where billionaires reveal their deepest secrets. Which part inspired you the most? Drop it in the comments. Let's figure out how to become billionaires together.